I'm James Williams, and welcome to the Grace and Truth podcast. I'm excited about what we are doing with this podcast. First of all, just let me thank you for listening. We cannot believe how many downloads we've had in just a really short amount of time. So it tells us that you are interested, at least, in somewhat in what we're doing. So we just thank you for letting us be a part of your day, whether you're your car or at home or wherever you listen. And let us know that. Give us a like on one of our platforms. We're on every podcast platform out there, I think. And send us a comment. What can we do better? As you can see, we're setting up our podcast studio now, and we're in the midst of getting it all settled, and it'll look a little bit better than this at some point. But we still want to have our conversations weekly, and it's just really great to have you with us each week. I have a wonderful, wonderful friend with me today, and I am excited about being able to talk to him. He has a plethora of ministry experience, and his name is Dr. Ted Sauter. Ted, thank you for being with us on the podcast today.
My pleasure.
Well, you know, when I first came to Georgia, the warning I got was, all right, these people are really, really great, and you're going to love them. But you do have 3 retired pastors in your congregation. And sometimes for pastors, that can be a red flag. It's not been for me, I must say. I have had retired pastors work with me every single place I've been, even my very first church out in the middle of a tobacco field in Kentucky. I had a couple of retired pastors, and it's always been a great thing for me and a pleasure. And I have found that here in working with you and Charlie and Randy. So thank you for sticking it out with me.
Well, being from Florida, I always had retired pastors, and some worked with me and some against.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. Well, you've been in ministry for a long time, and here's the thing that I love about having you guys around me, is all of you have served some of the largest churches in the United Methodist Church. I've served a large church in the United Methodist Church, so we kind of know the drill when it comes to being a large church pastor. And you were a large church pastor for a very long time in one congregation, which is not the norm for the United Methodist Church. So you were at, I know you were in Naples, Florida. Tell us where you were and how long you were there.
My last 27 years, I was assigned to the North Naples United Methodist Church. We changed the name when I was there to North Naples Church to kind of simplify for a lot of reasons and publicity. But while I was there, we relocated from 5 acres to eventually 35 acres and built about 10 buildings and raised money constantly, including building a high school. So I had a meaningful ministry there.
Yeah, you sure did. You sure did. And now you're retired, and you had some family here in Georgia, so you and Ginger decided to come south.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing. If you're from Florida, the way to go south is to go north. I was in South Florida most of my ministry. I was actually born in Tampa. But when we retired, unlike other people who retire and go to Florida, we wanted to be close to grandchildren. We have 2 in LA, and we have 2 here in Marietta. And so it was very easy to move here. And then with Delta and Atlanta's air traffic, it was a very easy decision for us to move from Naples, even though we built 2 homes there.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
We're glad we're here too.
Yeah, and you know, we're an independent Methodist church, and as you know, that's somewhat controversial. But we're in a kind of a history-making time, I think, and you've chosen. You're a retired United Methodist pastor. You did not disaffiliate as I did. So you retired as a UMC pastor and still have those credentials. So tell me about choosing Grace Resurrection, you and Ginger.
My wife chose it, and I did what she told me, which has been the secret of our marriage. But essentially, I told Ginger that when we moved up here, you pick the church. For our entire lives, we've gone to wherever I was told, and half the time I didn't want to go there. So we tried all the other United Methodist churches, and I don't believe in throwing stones, but I can say that we were disappointed at the level of friendliness or lack thereof. The music was dull, and what's more, I'm pretty picky about preaching. Many ministers, I wonder what were they thinking, because I don't understand what they said after I walk out. And we kept looking. And then how this church came about, we actually had met Randy 2 or 3 times, including as pastors of large churches. We'd met socially a couple of times. And we really didn't want to come here in case it didn't work out. It was going to be awkward. But we finally exhausted everything. So we came one Sunday. People were friendly. The music was outstanding. Randy's one of the best preachers I ever heard. Yeah. We got to hear Charlie later on. He's delightful. And we got involved with a small group. So my wife made the decision. The question was, well, since there's been this problem with the splintering of the United Methodist Church, it really doesn't impact me. I'm a United Methodist minister in good standing. I go back to Naples. The church I served was United Methodist. Yeah. I actually help a seminary that's United Methodist. So, but I have people who are in the global and people who are independent, and I get to do what I want. I am a free person.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, having you here makes this a richer congregation. That's for sure.
Well, the tithe isn't that much to make it that much richer. I wish I could make it a little richer, but I gave a lot to building programs in Naples all those years.
Well, we're glad you and Ginger are here. And I'm glad you mentioned United Seminary. United Seminary is really a great seminary for Methodist, and they are growing quickly right now. And you're on the board, I understand.
I'm a member of the board of trustees, and I knew the president, Kent Millard, for years because we were part of the group of the 100 largest congregations as pastors. We met together. Plus, Kent has a place in Naples. So I graduated from United in 1972, and then after retiring, I agreed to be a trustee, and then I became what they call an ambassador. So I try to encourage people to become students. I see our donors. I talk to some of my former members who are comfortable in their life and talk to them about giving to scholarships. And in fact, 2 weeks from now, I'll be traveling for a week in Pennsylvania, seeing donors, just thanking them.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I think theological education is at a crossroads right now, especially I think for those who are Wesleyan, and United is doing some exciting things, and I know many people who are there and have graduated from there, and they're making a real impact for the kingdom right now.
Well, we come out of the Evangelical United Brethren background, and I'm not sure I can say this correctly, but we are not only one of the oldest seminaries. We go back right after Civil War, founded by Bishop Wright, whose sons became rather famous with the airplane business.
Yes.
And so we have this great history, but we've always been into personal piety as well as into a social conscience and very open to social issues. And so we've tended to hold together a little better than the denomination, people who are more progressive and people who are more conservative, because the focus of the seminary is we're here for Christ and to have people lift up Christ and be involved in mission and ministry. And you may have differences of opinion about some of these political, theological issues, but we're not going to split over that. Yeah. We're going to lift up Christ. Hence, we have students who are many, many United Methodists, but we have global students and independent students and African American Episcopal.
Yeah.
We have them all.
That's great. That's great. So you have this really great career as a pastor, and you are very self-effacing often, and I think
it's easy when you're short.
Well, you're a great preacher, but you came here. I tell people all the time, when I retire, I'm going to go sit on the back pew somewhere. I'm not going to bother anybody. I'm just going to listen to the sermons, and I'll still do service, but I'm not going to bother anybody. And you retired, and you and Ginger came here to worship because you needed a family of worship. But then we asked you, because this is a church plant, and then we asked you to preach. How'd you feel about that?
I didn't want to, and I would have sat on the back row, but my wife likes the second row, so I got up front. What came about is because I did know who Randy was. Randy talked to me after a very short time about helping with a rotation of preaching. And I said, no, I've done this for 50 years. In my last church, I did 3 services a Sunday for 27 years. And I said, I'm quite happy not to. But he brought it up a couple of times and basically said, we're getting tired. They were retired. And he said, until we find somebody, will you fill in? And I agreed. And I never saw myself as a preacher. And my sense of call of the ministry, I didn't see so much as preaching. I'm more of a storyteller, and my background is debate and teaching. So I know Southern preachers tend to talk differently and with more power and stronger voices. I don't have that. So I was reluctant, but people were very kind to me. So I continued until we got somebody. In fact, I got on the committee to hire somebody, so I didn't have to do it anymore. You got my vote. But I will tell you a funny aside. My wife told me, I hadn't bought any new clothes after retiring. She said, now that you're preaching, you need to go and get new clothes. So we went out shopping. I got new suits, new clothes, and we went away for a couple of weeks, and I come back, and you're hired. I thought, why did I spend all this money? I lost money on this deal.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, I'm glad you're here. And as I'm talking, I'll be talking to Randy and Charlie too on the podcast. And, I had a call from a friend not too long ago who's still in the United Methodist Church. And that same week, interestingly enough, I had a call from a friend of mine who's in the Global Methodist Church. They're both pastors. And both of them used the same term with me. And I thought, gosh, that's something I need to really pray about and walk with people on, because I don't think I'm there, but I do know a lot of folks because of what we've just been through in the United Methodist Church and the splintering, if you will, and all that's happened. They both said, I feel like I've got a little PTSD from all of it. And being a retired pastor and watching all of that take place, what's your take on that, and what have you learned, and what do you think we need to learn from that?
Well, backing it up, I had a certain vision of what ministry would be like, and it happened to be that all the churches I was assigned to had been in transition, changing neighborhood. The only one that had not been in decline for at least a decade, if not 20 years, happened to be Naples. And there I was the fifth pastor assigned in less than 2 years. And as I looked back, they had been in turmoil for 20 years, and they had plateaued for 3 or 4 with their giving and attendance and were starting to shrink. So I always saw my job as to bringing together people who were very different. And one of the things that helped me, I debated in college. That was part of my scholarship. And you learn in debate to see that there are people of goodwill who have different perspectives. So as people wanted to polarize around pastors in Naples, I would always say, but can you see why some people really appreciated him or what he accomplished? And so I spent my whole ministry trying to be a peacekeeper and getting people to revision. Secondly, although I am still a loyal United Methodist pastor, and I am not considering at all leaving the denomination, I think there's some strengths that have been lost. I did not get into the politics of it. I had bishops who would attend the church I served and seminary presidents. But I took the approach, the best way I could help the United Methodist Church was not going to conference and meetings. I did work with local to develop missions. I said the best thing I can do is win people to Christ, baptize young people, grow the church, give money to missions,
Absolutely.
And help encourage people to go into the ministry and maybe help build 1 or 2 new churches or congregations in our area. And I said, that's going to be a lot more good than anything I can do to argue with preachers. I said, if I want to get into politics, I'll just talk with Republicans and Democrats, and we can fight cleanly instead of get into religion. So I think a lot of pastors have gotten caught into this polarization. But one of the things that happened, I very early in my ministry faced the fact that I realized the United Methodist Church was imperfect, and should I be in a more faithful covenant community? And then I came to the conclusion, you got this continuum from being very conservative, rigid, to very liberal, and there's flaws, there's problems with each one. And I finally came to the conclusion I was going to stay with grace. I became Christian in a community of grace. And what's more, the United Methodist Church always afforded me the possibility of preaching the gospel. I never had to go against my conscience. And sometimes when I annoyed people in congregations, that leadership backed me in the conference if they understood what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to see the splintering. I have people that are friends of mine in all the communities also.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, and I'm sorry to see it too, because, and I say all the time, I love the United Methodist Church. I love the Global Church. I love the independent churches, and I especially love the independent churches right now because I think
Well, it's a good thing that's what you have.
absolutely, absolutely, and I think that as independent Methodists, and I know folks think that's an oxymoron, but I see some really great, very healthy things happening in our independent churches right now, without the influence of the systemic problems that come with denominational ties. We know that denominations do a lot of great things, but I think denominations too are tied up in some of the things that we're dealing with in the country right now. And I feel like we can have a voice as an independent church that's not tainted by some other way out there opinion that may be put out to the media at some point. And you know, we just went through the situation with Charlie Kirk this last week, and his assassination, and churches are now struggling. Should we say something? Should we not say something? We don't want to offend the people that liked him. We don't want to offend the people that didn't like him. And we lose the fact that a soul, a human being, a father and a husband, someone whose faith in Jesus Christ was very important to him, is gone. Is gone, but just because of what he believed. And you said we were joking with you before the podcast that you could be our father. Everybody in this room, you could be. I think you could be my father too, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You would have had to be kind of
sexually active and promiscuous, but it goes against my moral code.
But you have a lot of wisdom, Ted. And what do you think? What do you think the church's response needs to be in a time like this, though? Because you do remember the assassinations of Martin Luther King, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy. You've been through this.
I was a student pastor my first year in Ohio, and some students were killed at Kent State. And so we've gone to wars, we've had assassinations. My approach, a couple of things. One is, when I dealt with difficult things in the church publicly, I didn't ignore them, but I always would go down on the people's level and say, this is a complex issue. And being a debater, I would try to identify truthfully why some people felt this way and some felt that. And then say, all I know is that as people of faith, we need to look at this. And I would kneel and pray. And most people found that helpful, whether I dealt with an issue that had happened with several arrests of homosexuals in the community in Lakeland years ago, or when we went to war with Iraq, or you can go the many wars. But I took that approach, and I really tried not to judge other people. You certainly have a judgment about your values, about what's right and wrong and integrity. But one of the books that was most helpful that I think everybody should read again was the one that basically, one that if I were in your shoes, I probably would think pretty much as you would, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It was a classic that no one seems to have read lately, which is also part of the problem with denominations, is that people make pronouncements. Pronouncements out there don't influence me. When my wife tells me something, it influences me a lot. Or if my friend tells me, or when one of my adult children tells me what they think. And I have 3 adult children who have very different worldviews. And when we get them together for a week each summer, we just have a simple understanding. You all have your opinions, you're all intelligent. However, I want you to know we're paying for this trip, so we're not going to discuss your politics. We're going to be here as a family. And so I look at the church that way. A church should be a family. And in fact, that's how I became a Christian, was my home church became a family. One of the things I was asked to mention, and I don't know if you want to do it now, is how I became a Christian. Yeah. I was not raised in the church. In fact, my family never went to church. My parents never heard me preach. But my mother said when I was in high school, I ought to have some religious influence. I didn't go. And I went to the Evangelical United Brethren Church. And the pastor there, I only ever had one, Troy Brady, put me in a confirmation class for senior high. And I was the only one because we didn't have any kids in the church. And he spent 2 years with me. Wow. Yeah. And then beginning of my junior year of high school, we had a church retreat, and I was elected president of our youth group, which wasn't a big deal. There were 12 kids, and the two most popular ones didn't run. And although I'd come intellectually to believe in Jesus, I wasn't born again. But at that retreat, after I was elected president, I went down to the altar at the church camp, and I said, Jesus, if you'll help me turn around this youth group, I'll become a Christian. And you're not supposed to bargain with God. I know that, but I did. And anyway, I felt a peace, and I had never felt that. I was full of acne. I was socially, didn't have many graces. My family moved all the time. My family was antisocial. So I really was an awkward person, but this church had loved me into believing. But then what happened after that, at Thanksgiving, we were at a family gathering down in Nokomis, Florida, and everybody, maybe 40 members of the family, they're all eating barbecue and drinking and swearing, very earthy family, and they're supposed to be having fun, and I look at their eyes, and I realize they're not happy. And I thought, I have a happiness they don't have. And how could I share that? And immediately had the thought I should become a minister, which I rejected because a couple of ministers I knew were religious and I wasn't. And so I put that aside. I wanted to be a math teacher or a cartoonist or maybe go into law or journalism. However, in the middle of my calculus exam, my freshman year, I had this aha moment. I'm not going to be a math teacher. I'm going to be a minister. But I still didn't think I knew how to do it. Yeah. And after my first year of college, I went out to Catalina Island for the University Christian Fellowship. And there I heard a preacher say, if God wants you to do something, you do it. He'll work in spite of you. So then the next February, I became licensed to preach in the Evangelical United Brethren Church. I was 19 years old. And then I went to a church college on a scholarship because my folks weren't going to back it. And then I went to United Seminary because they would give me an appointment to churches because, again, I had to earn my way through it. And so I started serving churches in 1969. And so I basically have been a pastor for 57 years.
Yeah, yeah. That's beautiful.
I know it looks and feels old. However, I have never forgotten being converted. And like Paul, like when you get into trouble, you go back to conversion. And out of that is I spent about half my ministry every summer spending a week going to youth camp and preaching because I could cartoon and talk to kids. So I've always put my focus not on the church. And that's the other thing I want to say. One of the things that helped me is every church I went to, and I noticed this very early, United Methodist pastors, by and large, were going to dying churches, and they'd say, what can I do to save this church? Now, the fundamentalists don't say that. They don't say, what can I do to save this church? They say, what can I do to save this community? Yeah. And it's a totally different question. And so what I would do very quickly to people who wanted me to turn the church around, I say, that's not my job. The gospel isn't that God so loved the church, he gave his only son. The gospel, which everybody learned, John 3:16, is God so loved the world. Right. And so I said, if you put the focus on the world and the gospel, the church will do well.
Absolutely.
And 50 years, I was pretty much correct about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really
Plus, I married well.
Well, you did. You did. Way above.
Well, Bishop Kola, who did several years teaching at the church and helped it grow, dear soul who's passed away now, said any Methodist minister didn't marry someone better than himself doesn't deserve to be in the clergy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the truth. Well, you said something really important there as we're talking about. All right, so what's our response to all this stuff going on in the world? And I noticed you got a little emotional when you were telling me about the pastor who spent time with you in the confirmation, because that is the Wesleyan theology of prevenient grace. You know, the grace that goes before us, and so you experience that with him, and I think that's the answer, Ted. I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone who's changed their mind because of something they saw on social media. Or I don't know anyone who's listened to some commentator or political pundit on television and changed their mind about something because of that. But
particularly when they're angry.
Yeah, and you know, Jesus. You look at his ministry. There were a few times when he preached to the masses, but almost every single encounter that we love about him is conversations that he had with people face to face and one on one.
Well, going back to this thing about preaching, I don't sound like a preacher. People will say that, but part of it is because I still so nervous about dealing with people and talking with people. I don't have a lot of social skills to this day. I just not good at it. So I'm terrified of people, and I don't want to preach. And I've listened to myself, and I know I don't have great presence or great voice. So what I do, I learned to do this a long time ago. I pick 4 people, whether or not they're in service. I pick a 10-year-old boy who's squirming, who doesn't want to be there. And I pick a couple who's in their 20s who maybe just started to come back to church and thinking about their faith. And I imagine a guy, I used to fish with him actually, who's in his 50s, who's gone to church, been a decent person, successful, and he's saying, is this all it is? And then I imagine some little lady in her late 80s who's heard anything I preach about at least 10 times, including by 2 or 3 people who were outstanding. And I ask myself, what do those 4 people hear? So I talk to that little boy, I talk to that couple, I talk to that man, and I talk to that little old lady. And the proof that it's right is a Sunday. Maybe you never had this happen. I don't write anything down. I had one Sunday, I did the service, and it went really badly in Naples. And gosh, I can't believe this went so badly. So I reworked it in my mind for the second service, and it went worse. And then the third service, after I reworked again, it was even worse. And it's like people who go bowling, and when they don't do it right, everything hurts. And I'm shaking hands as people are going out the door, and no one's saying anything nice. People are avoiding. And one of the little old ladies comes and gives me a hug. She said, Ted, we do love you. And that's the key.
That's it.
That little boy, that couple.
That's it.
That older, but that little old lady.
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. It's about community, loving people in spite of them, because God loves us in spite of us. And that's real. I mean, if you can help people understand that, they know you love them, they'll accept whatever your views are that are opposite theirs.
You talk about loving, though. I had a different approach than most pastors. Because I've went into such troubled places. The place I went into, Lakeland, the man I followed, no one had ever followed successfully, and because he did everything. And I've been there a little while, and he was much older, and the church was older. And why did they have this young minister? And this one lady who particularly let me know she couldn't stand me went in the hospital, and I went to visit her. And she said, why are you coming to see me? And I said, because you go to the church. She said, I'm not even a member. I said, but you do attend. She said, I don't know why you're coming. She said, I don't like you. I don't like you. And I looked at her, I said, I don't like you either. But I said, you go to the church, I'm the pastor, and as long as you go to this church, we're in a relationship, and so I'm going to come and see you and pray for you till you get better, and if you don't want to see me, you better get better soon. So I had a prayer with her and left. Yeah. She got better.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Well, but it's a different kind of love, but, I wasn't going to be beaten down. I didn't have to do that to love her. But loving people, I guess, because I need it.
I was very blessed. I know you know who Ellsworth Callis is.
Yeah.
And he was one of my preaching professors at Asbury. And he used to say, if you don't remember anything else I tell you in this class, remember this. Everybody you come in contact is the least. Mm-hmm. Always see every person, from the millionaire banker in your community to the guy who lives on the street. Everybody's the least. Be Jesus to the least. And I've always remembered that. I've tried to do it. I've made a couple of mistakes here and there, but
haven't we all?
It's true.
Well, I know that I always realize in any congregation, there are people who are barely making it. There are people who are trying to have faith, but they don't really believe, and faith is a gift. Yeah. And they're all at different places, and I may not know, but I used to tell my staff, I said, we have this continuum of integrity and values and standards and grace, and that we give freely. And I said, when it all comes down to us, if I have to choose to stray, I'm going to stray on the side of grace.
Absolutely. So we're running out of time.
Okay.
This has been wonderful. And And I want to give you one last opportunity to do something that I think is important, because you do have a lot of experience and you do have a lot of people who not only you love, but love you. And as we start this new congregation here in East Cobb, what's some advice you'd have for us?
Hire a good minister, but I think we did that. I think it's very important that they put the focus on what they want to be spiritually now and take that into the future, and not worry as much about the space and the property. I know they're anxious. My own wife talked with me about it Sunday after our meeting. Here's one of the things I discovered. God's timing is not mine. And every time I wanted to speed things up, God always slowed it down and made me be patient. And every time when I wanted to take time because I'm not ready, I had to act. The church in Naples, if we had voted earlier or later by even a few weeks, we would not move. Every one of my predecessors wanted to relocate that church. And the first year when I polled the people, not one person wanted to relocate. 7 years later, I had a 95% congregational vote to move. And no one heard from me that it was a good idea. I never told anybody. And people said, how'd you do that? I said, I changed the question, because they used to always ask, what do you want? And I said, that's not even important. The question is, what does God want? How do we love each other? And how do we reach out to the community, especially the poor? And I said, if we answer those questions, somehow it's going to work out. And I was right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good word. Well, thank you, Ted. Thank you for being with us. I'm glad you're here. And I appreciate you being on the podcast today.
I'm honored. Thank you.